at our premiere in September of 23, we premiered at the Women's International Film Festival in Philadelphia, opening night. I had a dear friend so it was really great. We had a
Yeah.
a plum position. I had a dear friend from the Netherlands was visiting me, and so she attended the premiere with me,
Mm.
and it was almost immediately after the film, it finished and they were rolling the credits, and she looked at me and exclaimed, she said, "I've never really thought that I could be doing this with my money, with my investments." And I thought, "Bam, that's exactly
Yeah.
what we want."
Welcome to Women Disrupting Tech. My name is Dirk-Jan Upkes, and on this podcast I give the women who work in tech the platform they need to inspire and empower each other. Join me on a journey into the world of entrepreneurship, funding, biases and role models to discover the strategies for success in the tech industry. In other words, how women can disrupt tech. Are you ready to listen? Hey, welcome back to Women Disrupting Tech, and thank you for tuning in to episode 123. Before we start, in this episode we discuss investments, and everything in this episode is for informational purposes only, and none of the content is intended as investment advice. So you know that capital fuels ideas, but whose ideas are we fueling? In this episode of Women Disrupting Tech, I'm joined by Azin Radsan van Alebeek. She's the co-founder and managing partner at Emmeline Ventures and the co-producer of the movie Show Her the Money. Azin is using venture capital as a lever for change, not just to generate returns, but to shift behaviors, open doors, and fuel a broader range of ideas. In this episode, Azin and I dive into the question why showing female founders some money builds a better future and reshapes venture capital. By listening to our conversation, you'll learn how capital can be used as a lever for change, what she means when she says that thinking big is essential when raising VC money, and why a quick no from an investor can actually be progress. As you'll hear, Azin is a great storyteller. One story that stuck with me is when Azin talks about her time as a stay-at-home mom. Instead of sitting on the couch waiting for life to happen, she used every available opportunity to learn skills that she needed to grow. I think it's a beautiful way to present motherhood as a strength rather than as a gap on your resume. So when you're ready to listen and learn how showing her the money changes venture capital, please welcome to Women Disrupting Tech, Azin Radsan van Alebeek. So, Azin Radsan van Alebeek, good afternoon. Welcome to Women Disrupting Tech. Glad to have you. It's an honor to have you. Let's start with some background. How did you get to funding Emmeline Ventures? What happened before that?
That's such a good question, and Dirk-Jan, thank you for having me. And Dirk-Jan, you and I met in Rotterdam in May of 2025, so a few months ago, at the inaugural screening of Show Her the Money, a documentary that was screening in Rotterdam. It was the first time in the Netherlands. For me, it was a personal win moment as well because I hold Dutch citizenship and have lived in the Netherlands for 8 years, and I felt the message of the movie, which is about raising awareness about the alarming lack of women represented in the venture capital industry, right? And
Mhm.
this was originally, it was very much a US-based idea, but as I began talking with my friend group in my community, my venture capital community, I understood it's really a global issue, and that's why I worked so hard to ensure that this film could screen outside the US as well, and I had targeted as the Netherlands as a country I really wanted to make sure this conversation was ignited. And in this, what your understanding is, for me, Emmeline is very mission focused. It is about using venture capital, the proper venture capital techniques, ways of investing, the
Mhm.
ability to make outsized returns, much larger on average than public market returns, and the ability to change behavior and to bring innovation to our future. That essence is very important to me when we overlay it with a gender lens. And so I am now in what is often called a third chapter of life. I've had some great prior chapters, big, like Hoofstukken,
Uh-huh.
um, almost like a trilogy, if you will. And in this part of my story, I am fully focused on creating legacy on a global level and using my privileges and my past experiences and my past knowledge. It's all ties together. This is the right spot for me right now.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
and then
the also good to understand that indeed our no, our goal is the same to close that funding gap, though we have different ways of doing it.
yeah, and I think that and that's important, right? Like, I think that's a celebration that we have different ways of doing it because it is such a large, systemic, intractable it seems intractable. Like, how are we gonna do this with any large problem? You attack it from all different sides, different angles with different techniques and different tools. Like, right, visually, I have the image of a huge boulder. Well, we're not all going to focus on one part with the same tool. We're going to approach it from different angles and different tools. Yours might be blunt edged, mine might be precision, like a laser. Right, someone else is going to come with some other alchemy to break up that boulder. And I think we all need to coordinate and collaborate and celebrate our community together.
Absolutely agree.
Yeah, thank you. So, I will often present myself as someone who it is extraordinary that I sit in the chair that I do right now, given my background, and at the same time, it is exactly where I should be given my background. So, that dichotomy holds true, and in this, I'll share that I have, a great educational foundation. So I always reference it because I'm a firm believer in education, and I know that I have benefited from a very good one. I studied quantitative economics, so math-based economics at Stanford. I worked at a boutique consulting firm where we focused on performance-based financial analysis and company valuation for both private
Mhm.
and publicly traded companies. So I've been immersed at this, thinking primarily of overall company value and how the C-level and board of directors can operate to improve shareholder value. I went to business school, continued in more financial learning and marketing and some other areas, then went back to the same consulting role. So I was on trajectory and had great exposure, learnings, network. And then I took a huge pivot, which it's again a dichotomy. Like, do you know me as the type A business person, or do you know me as what I reinvented myself into, the stay-at-home mom? And so for 25 years, given context at that time, I chose to be at stay-at-home mom when our first kid was born. Had
Mhm.
2 more kids. We moved to the Netherlands. I learned Dutch. I figured out how to live in Europe and build my own friend group, and then we moved back to the US, and I started doing a lot more volunteerism, primarily in school systems. I taught, I coached sports, I've coached life and performance coaching from a mental side. What else have I done? I've been on a bunch of advisory committees and boards. And through it all, I've always been an investor, primarily in public markets. And then in 2008, I entered into angel investing.
Okay.
So,
And so, how did you end up in angel investing then?
yeah, I'll tell you, it's a lovely story. It's a friend of mine, the father of one of my children's good friends. He was involved in an angel group in Oregon. And I've actually never asked him, like, "Why did you ask me?" But he asked me, he invited me. They were doing a pooled investment. There were 50 slots,
Mhm.
so they were looking for 50 investors to put in a certain amount of money, collectively to diligence and to select deals in a 1-year period. And he invited me into the room. And I'm so thankful that he thought of me because I didn't know anything about angel investing. And honestly, I didn't really know about the private markets and venture capital and how it all worked. So that was my first entry into it. It was a huge learning year. And I will say it's also remarkable that first pooled investment, there were 50 of us.
Mhm.
As I mentioned, we voted collectively. We built a portfolio of 5 companies. That portfolio has returned over 10x returns. I mean, it was phenomenal. And I didn't know this, but it took about 7 years for the first distribution check to come back, and it took 14 for the final distribution, right? Like, venture investing at the early stages, uh, is very long term. But that got me curious and interested, and I started making direct investments into truly friends and families startups. I looked for other opportunities to invest, became an LP in some venture funds, and it has remained an industry, an asset class that I just find so wonderful. It's hopeful. It's
Mhm.
thinking about the future. It's learning about the latest and greatest innovation and technologies. The people who are in it have this insatiable curiosity and positivity while remaining skeptical at the same time. So,
Yeah,
is that
that's a
helpful?
yeah, that's and it's a unique trade-off, I think, for that this sector is in. It's indeed, on the one hand, it's really you have to be really curious as an investor because you are seeing all kinds of new things that no one knows about or nobody cared about before, and then all of a sudden you have to understand what it means and if you want to invest in it. And on the other hand, you have to sort of be a bit protective, so a bit skeptical about it indeed.
Yeah. I mean, I find I would say to my background, I have been someone who has always felt like an outsider. I
Hmm.
grew up in a small town in Michigan where my brother and I were the only kids who looked like us at school, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And yet I was part of that, and I look back and I'm like, I loved that that is part of my background. I've lived in the US as someone who's felt Iranian, different, but then when I lived in the Netherlands, I was told I was an example of an American, which was very funny to me.
Yeah.
Um, and I speak a few languages, so I have always had it's innate, right? I operate on this continuum of being, either in or out or somewhere in between.
Hmm.
As you're saying, as a VC, I think that's a really valuable skill because you do have to look at both ends and be able to firmly and convincingly, support all the different views.
Yeah. So how does that background? You mentioned that you and your brother were the only Iranian guys or people in the village.
Yeah.
How does that help as a VC, or how does that help in general in life to
Well,
adapt
I
to?
think yeah, no, I'll start with the how does it help in general in life, and I think it's the understanding that, y your what you hold as true is not necessarily held true by everyone else. And so to do a few things, understand what it is that others, hold dear, what their values are, how they're operating,
Hmm.
and understand the why of it, and then to be able to also, reflect upon your own values and understand, like, and how come this is important to me, and to look for commonality.
Okay.
And I would say, the same if you've been an expat, if you've lived in other countries. When I lived in the Netherlands, right? Like, things were different than both my Iranian cultural background and things were different from my American upbringing.
Uh-huh.
How approaches and, in being curious, the fun really is, like, understanding why. Why is it this way? Why do they operate that way? What does it protect? What does it signify? And, so if you approach it with open-mindedness and curiosity, it allows your world to be so much larger.
Yeah. Do you find it also more fun that way?
Oh, 100%, but I think I'm a curious type person, and I like learning, and yeah, it's just it's and I'm an I mean, if you wanna go into, like, personality types, I could tell you why it fits with my personality types, but the idea of also, being able to in the US, there's a term called code shifting, right? So if you're in one group, you act one way, and then when you go into another community, you might start pushing and flexing other aspects of your personality,
Yeah.
and that's just for me, it's fun. It's not acting, but it's an ability to allow your entire personality to um, be at play, if you will.
Yeah. But also to bring to highlight certain parts of your personality based on the situation that you're in, if I hear you correctly.
I think so, yes.
Yeah. So I was wondering, because you mentioned that when you were first involved, you first got involved with angel investing. You were with a group of 50, I think. Uh,
Yes.
out of curiosity, how many women were there?
Yes, great question. My memory is there were probably 10 of us. So it wasn't awful, but it wasn't great, right? So 20%. And at that time, and it could be fewer, by the way. I might be overestimating. I can tell you similarly and differently. When I was working in consulting and was working with C-level executives and boards of directors, I remember, and this was for 5 years, and I must have had over 100, 200 different executives and individuals that we worked with. I remember at most 5 people being women.
That's
That's
pretty
l
low.
that's pretty low,
Yeah.
really low. And so this is if you say, like, "Why am I doing what I'm doing at Emmeline?" To help accelerate women in specifically in now venture capital, which is again, I am taking a small chunk of the entire problem because this is something I've seen my entire life. The lack of representation by women and people of color in positions of power and in positions where there is great money to be made, right?
Yeah. Maybe also tell the audience what that does. What is the result of the underrepresentation of women?
Yeah, I would say it's multifold. So one is if you assume there's here's one idea for you. Those who are intimate to problems are the ones who will be solving them. Because if you don't know about a problem, it's unlikely that you're going to be thinking a founder who's building a startup to solve a problem. That is a very difficult path. It is lonely, it's hard. So you are going to choose to work on something that is very important to you.
Hmm.
So if we can agree on that, what it means is if you don't have enough representation of different types of founders and that we assume that certain problems are gender based, it means that conditions that affect her are going to be under resourced, underfunded, under investigated, um, and undersolved. And that, because venture is all about our future, that means we're just setting ourselves up today for a future that is less and less inclined to to fully activate over half of our population. And I'm going to add one more thought on this. If you assume correctly that talent is equally distributed, and I don't care if you want to talk about gender, skin color, geography, left or hand rightedness, political orientation, religious orientation, talent is equally distributed. What is at issue is opportunity is not. And so again, you are narrowing a focus, capital fuels ideas. And if we're not fueling a full cross section of ideas, we are building a future that doesn't allow all of us to be our best self. So that's one. Two, for those, and that affects everyone, whether
Hmm.
you know about venture capital or not, it's going to affect you. How it also will affect those who actually invest in this space, be they founders, general partners, GPs like myself,
Hmm.
or LPs, those who invest in the funds, like an asset class,
Mhm.
those three constituent groups are also highly male. So 85% GPs are male, 98% founders are male, and around 80% of investors are male. What happens is asset classes I mentioned earlier, it typically has delivered 2 times the returns that a public market portfolio will return. So if you think a public market returns typically 10% of a return, your investments in venture are 20%. That's a huge difference over time. It is the wealth creation difference, right? One
Yeah.
is it is true generational wealth, let me say it that way. So if women are not participating here, we're also falling behind, not only because of our gender pay gap, but because of what happens once we get that pay and how we invest it.
Yeah. And this is not solved by just investing in your ETF index fund, whatever.
No. And mind you, by first off, disclaimer, I'm not a financial advisor, right? So please trust yet verify everything I say on this. But two, I do firmly believe you need to have a balanced portfolio. Yes, you should have some ETFs. Yes, you should have some fixed income, assuming that you meet the requirements and that I mean, I can go into this, but I'm fairly conservative. You need to be thoughtful about how much you put into into the alternative asset class. But assuming you're able to, you should be considering this.
Yes. And then still go through certified financial advisors.
Well, let me ask you, what do you mean about that?
Or people who have been at least have are registered. Sorry, that was
When
the
you
word.
to make these investments?
Yeah. Well,
Typically,
to get advice on.
yes, exactly. Yes, yes, to get advice. Thank
Oh,
you.
no, not to make the investment, but to get advice. Okay, this is
Yeah,
how much you could.
yeah. And
Uh,
I can just quickly say you'll wanna think about your risk tolerance, your age, your, overall goals and values, right? There's a long list of questions, and what's right for you is not right for the next person. But there are some ranges, some bands around which we can, say, "Well, this is typically what one might do."
so I want to talk about some statistics about funding of female founders. Because through PitchBook, I found out that 0.9% of VC funding, and these are US numbers, what is it? 6% of deal count. So 6% of the number of deals that were done in the, what was it, up until August this year, 2025, uh, go to female founders. What to you was the first moment you realized, hey, but this is like a very low number? Because this number has been sort of the same for past decade, I think.
That's exactly what I was gonna say, yes. I think 5 years ago, almost exactly 5 years ago, I entered into a program called run by Pipeline Angels.
Mhm.
It is They run investor boot camps that are targeted towards women and women of color primarily, and it's to build the ecosystem, to build the pipeline of those who are both investors and founders. And so you asked, when did I first hear about this number? Was likely during that boot camp. It was very much a focus of giving us the data and I wanna say the inspiration to make a difference, but obviously it was something that I intuitively already knew, and that's when I heard the real data.
So, what was your first thought out of curiosity?
Well, when I heard that number of the 2%, I don't know what exactly my first thought was, but let me say there's a few things I was thinking. One, a roll of the eyes of, I didn't realize it was that low, but I
Uh-huh.
had expected it would have been low." The second thought would be some skepticism of, is that number really true or not? And what does that number actually represent? getting into the data, because if you remember, I was a data girl back long ago.
Mhm.
And how does one change this? So those are, those would have been preliminary thoughts. I'll give you one data back because I think I don't want to detract from the very low numbers of women, female founders in the venture space. What I often have been asked is, well, how many women are actually presenting their ideas to venture funds? And so that number's 30% is what I've heard, right? So you could say that the number is still low relative um, to the number of submissions. And then you could ask, and why aren't more women submitting, right? It's a pipeline question. And
Yeah.
for me, when you want to talk about how is it that we can bring more female representation into this entire ecosystem, like I started at the beginning, of course, what we're doing will have effect, but I think there are cultural issues at play as well. How do we educate? How do we, what expectations do we put on our girl students versus our boy students, right? How do we parent them? How do we speak to them differently? So it is not going to be solved in one space.
No, and not in, I don't think it's gonna be solved in one generation.
I don't, although people ask me about this too, and my hopefulness looking forward. I would say I have 3 children who are in, like, their late 20s, one who's 30, and so through them, I get to see the eyes of their generation, and I would say even the generation younger than them. There is a different approach towards gender and the understanding of gender limitations. I think some of those hurdles have been removed. Some of the limitations are being taken away. There's a broader sense of what a girl can do, what a boy can do, right? And I actually do here was something that for me was a huge aha, is we talk a lot about young girls and young women and women at large and giving them opportunities and making sure that they feel like they have the full spectrum. And I had a young man point out to me, he said, we men don't all want to be the knight on the horse either. And there are many more roles for the young boys to play as well and the men to play as well, and I thought that gave me great pause.
Yeah. Yeah, it's indeed really important also to see that, there is some change in how we, educate and raise our children. I don't have any children myself, but, I think it does start there, making the changes starts there, and then indeed there's a pipeline issue that also has to be solved. So I was also wondering about one thing you said early on. You wanted to use venture capital to change this. Why? Why use something that at least I consider to be broken and part of the cause?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I don't know that I've actually made this link before so overtly, but I will say it really roots back to maybe some core beliefs I hold, and
Hmm.
they are illustrated by my work coming out of college. Remember, I mentioned I was working for a boutique. It was a startup boutique consulting firm. And at core of what we did was designing systems for the executive group, primarily,
Hmm.
pay systems that focus them on the key drivers of success. So, what you can pull out from this is I'm actually a firm believer that money is a great carrot to get people to focus and do uh, what you want them to do, right?
Yeah. So as an incentive, I'm not arguing that it doesn't work, but I'm just
Right.
it,
And
so
so if we so if we hold that true and then we say, "There is a great deal of money to be made in venture. Let us use that capacity, that ability to again help people understand the value here, because what statistics we haven't talked about yet is that female founders tend to outperform. They are much more capital
Yeah.
efficient.
Yeah.
They exit faster, right? And and their return on the investment is much higher. So it's all about focusing the vision on where the money is. Show me the money
Yeah.
is is a great way to distill it.
Yeah. So that's a great bridge to the movie. Show her the money. Um, Maybe for people who haven't seen it or haven't read the book, there's a book, I
There's a
think.
book, it came out, I believe it was July 15th. It's in hardback, and paperback recently came out. We've been on the #1 bestseller list at Amazon. It's incredible.
Yeah. So for those who haven't read the book or seen the movie, what is it about? What is the
Yeah. Well,
except wonderful female founders and
yes.
their
Well, I'll
investors,
tell you
actually.
what is it about, and I'll tell you first what the book is about, and then I'll tell you what the movie is about, because they're slightly different. So the book is, I believe it's 40 chapters, and each chapter is the story of an individual who is affiliated with a film, either as a producer or a cast member.
Hmm.
And then the idea is in reading these stories, for someone who wants to get involved, you will recognize the paths to getting involved are varied. There's no one path, there's no right path, and that all of our past experiences are important. And by the way, I think so then just many of the stories are highly inspiring and funny, and give you moments of lovely learning and reflection. So that's what the book is about, all wrapped up in the idea of let us inspire you. And if you pull to the film, I talk about it in fact a few different ways, and I'm not sure what you heard me talk about the night at in Rotterdam. The film is really about inviting people in, and especially women, helping them invite them into this world of venture, of startup investing in a way that is approachable, that is enjoyable,
Hmm.
entertaining, and inspiring, because the film follows 4 founders. It follows their journeys, and the journeys, as I had mentioned earlier, they have peaks and valleys.
Oh, yeah.
In the same day, you might go from a peak to valley a few different times, and this continues for years. And the film actually does follow, longitudinally, I think about, 6 months, 6 to 12 months of the 4 different founders, and it intersects then with 2 venture capital firms, ours and another,
Hmm.
and it includes also a few angel investors. And so we're really trying to give a beautiful storytelling of what goes on in this space, because that isn't something that most people are privy to. And, for founders, it is it's such um, like a hits their heart.
Hmm.
They see themselves in the film. And for others, it allows them to understand, "Hey, actually, I could be doing this, and I could be doing it as an investor, but maybe that's not right for me. I could be doing it as an ecosystem builder. Maybe I'm just gonna be someone who talks about this to all my friends," right? But there's lots of ways to activate. And this I've talked about all very specifically, it's related to venture. But what I also like to talk about with this film is it goes a level higher. You can view it as a level higher to say anything's possible. Just remove your own self-limiting beliefs. And that for me is the strongest message of this film. As you see when you see it, it's the idea of like, "Hmm, I can do that."
Yeah, but also I can invest in that because there were two founders I want to pick out
Yeah.
that I remember. One is
Yep.
Jasmine Jones.
Yes.
She produces prosthetic bras.
Yes.
So for people who have had breast cancer,
Yes.
for instance, or had to have breast removed, that they can have bras that actually, well, um, give them back a part of their identity. And the other is Marion Leitner, who had an idea where I was at first, when I first saw it, like, okay, how does this work? It's luxury wines in cans. And it only, the quarter literally only dropped with me when she told that she had been selling to Southwest Airlines, which is a big US airline. And
Yes.
I was like, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, there it's about weight. And then all of a sudden, a can of wine makes a lot of sense. So, going back to the limiting beliefs, what are the limiting beliefs that hold male investors back from investing in those two ideas?
Yes. I'm going to tackle them differently. So, limiting and beliefs for male investors in general, not to go into female spaces, I would say I don't know that it starts with a limiting belief, but it starts with a lack of knowledge. And remember at the beginning we had talked about those who are best served to solve a problem are those who experience it. I would say investors are also best served investing in spaces they know a lot about, right? Um, you should you should have a good deal of knowledge, experience, understanding, and usually interest fuels that need to like dig and to understand more. And so I would say for many of the business solutions that are affecting her, I feel that just like men just don't understand. They just don't know. Do I fault them for it? A little bit, but not a lot. I'm like, you have to invest in what interests you and what you know well. What I can fault them on is not taking a moment to understand how large of a market many of these solutions are in, right? And as a venture investor, you want to be investing in spaces that are very large and that are growing. That's very important to ensure that you can model out the appropriate returns. And so the self-limiting belief is that I would say that they're guilty of is not taking the moment to be curious, not taking the moment to broaden their aperture, and and not wanting to perhaps bring in other voices in their investment committees, on their diligence teams, and to trust them when they are being told, "Hey, wait a second, this is a really lucrative market." And I will say, I have been seeing more and more that there are traditional male investors who are coming into this space, and I think of them as being very smart.
Yeah, it's still 50% of the population.
Yeah, 50% of the population with uh, pent up demand and need for solutions that will be instrumental in improving health outcomes, for example, for half the world's population. And in many of those solutions, if they're focused on her health, particularly in maternity, right, and during pregnancy, you really then are affecting 100% of the population.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So was there during the it took, I think, 6 months or so, or it's the film spans about 6 months of developments.
Yes.
Was there a specific moment that you remember while shooting the movie, creating the scenes, that you thought like, okay, and this is why I'm doing the work that I'm doing. This is why I made this movie.
Well, that's such a good question. No one's asked that yet. I would say, in full honesty, while we were filming the movie, working on the movie, I do sit with a skeptic hat a little bit too long. I was had a foot in both doors of like, is this film actually gonna ever get made, right? So I think the during the production of it, I might not have had that moment of like, the big light bulb. At our premiere in September of '23, we premiered at the Women's International Film Festival in Philadelphia, opening night. I had a dear friend, yeah, so it was really great. We had a
Yeah.
plum position. I had a dear friend from the Netherlands was visiting me, and so she attended the premiere with me, and it was almost immediately after the film, it finished and they were rolling the credits, and she looked at me and exclaimed, she said, "I've never really thought that I could be doing this with my money, with my investments." And I thought, "Bam, that's exactly what we want." And so for me, that was a little bit of a different answer. I'm answering slightly differently than you asked me, but like that idea of this is why
Yeah.
we're doing this, is to
Yeah.
help people open their aperture, open their thinking about what can be done.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the film is very powerful in that sense. From showing, let's say, business cases that are, I think, don't traditionally go through VC or even angel investing at all, and also, yeah, really inspiring people like, hey, it can just be you as a restaurant owner, or I think there's a owner of a chain of restaurants or franchise holder in there, um, or a woman who is just runs into, let's say, a larger paycheck, who then decides to do something meaningful with
Yeah,
her money, to really to use capital to make the change.
purpose.
Yeah, with purpose.
And there have been studies done that women investors tend to want we tend to look for purpose
Mhm.
and fulfillment, right? And I would say, as someone who's running a venture capital fund, right, like I'm investing to make money for profit with purpose attached. And what's lovely that I can point to is there are a number of studies that show when you combine purpose with profit, your profit tends to, in fact, be greater. So there, and because that's one of the limiting beliefs we hear often, that if you invest for purpose, that you are therefore accepting concessionary, lower than expected returns, and that's not true.
No, that's a bit indeed a myth, also that you have here, and that you even get in comments on social media. Oh yeah, but you're doing it for the impact, so why are you not doing it for free?
Yeah. And I would say and I really dislike the word impact, by the way, because all investments have impact. Everything we do has
Hmm.
impact. And so the question is, are you aware of the impact?
Hmm.
And is the impact positive or negative? And from whose point of view?
Yeah. So it's more about purpose and than it is
Yeah.
about impact.
Yeah. And I would say intention. Like I know
Yeah.
we are very intentional and deliberate at Emmeline.
Yeah. So about Emmeline, because you focus on her overall health,
Right.
um, maybe explain what her overall health
Right.
falls into and what it includes and excludes.
Sure. And I'm gonna present it in two different ways to start because I know, we're all different types of thinkers, so I hope it lands as people are listening, they're like, "Oh, I like it that way," and some people will like it a different way, but I often say we invest in her overall health, where health is a broadened, definition to include her physical health, her mental health, her financial health, and her environmental health. So those core pillars of her health
Hmm.
keep her truly whole and healthy and able to accelerate. Another way to think about it is we invest to manage her health, build her wealth, and help her live in a cleaner and safer world. And so, and if you really want to distill it very like chop, 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 I could say we invest in femtech, fintech, and food tech, right?
Ah,
That's a very condensed distillation because it's a little bit broader than that, but I like
yeah,
the three Fs
yeah,
and and that
yeah.
helps with people, right? And so what does it mean? So we are looking for solutions that are gonna support her,
Hmm.
exclusively, differently, and disproportionately. And those terms are often used for medical conditions because you can know, think about, um, pregnancy
Hmm.
and menopause, let's say, are
Yeah.
medical conditions that she exclusively experiences. Men don't experience that, right? And then you have differently and disproportionately. Women disproportionately experience are affected by Alzheimer's. I think it's like a rate of 2 to 1. I mean, it's
Uh-huh.
a huge number.
Yeah.
So we're curious about those solutions that are supporting her there. Differently would be cardiology. So how a female presents with her heart conditions is different than a male. And so again, there need to be more studies because your listeners should know that women have not been involved in medical testing um, until I believe most recently, I believe it began, and double check me on this, but only as recent as 15 to 20 years ago.
Yeah, actually that coincides with, or that matches with what a previous guest told me, that when she was studying, which is like 20, 30 years ago, most of the lab rats were still male, to make sure that even in the lab rats they could exclude all the hormonal
Right,
effects,
right?
which,
And has is one of our major effects across a woman's life is
yeah,
our hormones, right?
yeah,
It affects us from it strongly and consistently. So it's only recent studies that include female bodies in the study work to really understand those differences in how medicines are treated and therapies and advice, right? And so again, looking at financial and environmental health, we apply that same lens when we're thinking about the solution, the startups that we're looking at. I'm going to give you an example of a financial health company that we're invested in, the Beans. It is a financial budgeting app that is offered through employers and is specifically targeted to healthcare and into medical healthcare with a lot of nurses, teachers, right? Like those employee groups, they're predominantly female. So again, say we're looking in ways like men are going to use it too. Of course, they're going to use it, but we're starting in groups that is highly female. So we're going to help
yeah.
her more.
Okay. Do you
And
also
sorry,
Do
and
you
then
also invest in companies who do it match with the purpose, but who have a male founder?
so I was going to say so. Thank you. Before I go then, we're looking at seed stage, which is an earlier stage company. They have a product, they have some revenues, or they're working on their product market fit. By virtue of the types of companies or solutions that we're trying to solve, it is almost always a byproduct that there will be a female on the founding team. So, can there also be a male on the founding team? Absolutely. Do we want strong female representation? Absolutely.
Yeah, but it's not women only.
Not women only. No.
Okay.
So a number of our startups have men on the founding teams as well because truly diversity goes both ways.
Yeah. So, what kind of founders are you most excited to back? So it's seed, that is one thing. It's either mixed or female
Yeah.
founded. What else?
I'm looking for if I could and distill it in a few words, who I'm looking for. I'm looking for someone who has intimate knowledge of the problem she's solving, right? Because I want it because in I want them to know the problem inside and out and to be able to iterate on the solutions because the solutions we see at pre-seed and seed stage are going to change because they're and here's like the second aspect. I want a founder who's going to be curious and
Hmm.
who's going to be doing a good deal of hypothesis testing, gathering new knowledge, bringing that back in right into the system. So it is an iterative process. If they are both curious and aware of the problem, they are going to be finding the correct solution that the market wants to pull. And so that requires a good deal of um, another way to say it is a strong back and an open heart, right? firm in convictions and yet open to receiving new information and processing it and adding it into the system.
Strong
That's
about the what and the why, and soft on the how.
yeah, yeah. And I'm trying to think if there's anything more. I've been playing around with a few other variables that I look for. I'm just gonna keep those to the side now, but, I try and embody what I'm looking for, right? Like, I am iterative, constantly learning. I joke around with people, I'm like, "I'm my own LLM, basically, like, just keep feeding me data, and I'm gonna be readjusting, um, and expanding my knowledge." And of course, like integrity. It is a long relationship that we hold together. So we need to be able to trust one another and to really feel like, hey, we're in it together for the long haul.
Yeah. What does integrity mean? How does it sort
Does it
of
manifest?
yeah
Show up?
manifest?
I would say for me, it's being open, it's being clear, it's having the hard conversations when you need to,
Uh-huh.
it's leaving ego aside. And it's just and trust is part of that, right?
Last question on you as an investor. You spent your time between the US and Europe. What are the differences in how you see that women founders are supported or not supported by the ecosystem?
Yeah. I'm not an expert in the European ecosystem. And one thing, Dirk-Jan, we didn't talk about is with at Emmeline, we're investing only in US-based companies with our Fund One. And my presence in Europe has to do more with personal interest and having lived here and being a frequent visitor. So and wanting to intersect and use my learnings from the US. So, how are female founders how is it different for her in Europe than in the US? I would say it's maybe more difficult in Europe. So what I there are fewer funds like ours in Europe that are really very have that gender lens overlay with the VC. They definitely exist. There's some incredible ones out there in the Netherlands for sure, in the UK and in France as well and across the continent, right?
Hmm.
I believe the number in the US is much greater. We've been around for longer, and the capital that we, um, control is larger. So, more access.
Is it also yeah maybe not for women per se, but also the fragmentation of the market a problem? Because the US is one big market in
Right.
the end. If you're FDA approved,
Yeah,
you're FDA approved. You can sell pretty much everywhere,
yeah.
barring some
That's a
state
great
limit.
point. Yes, for
But
sure.
but in Europe, there's legislation that is different from one country to the next, even though we're pretending to be a union.
Yes. No, that's a great point. I would say, yes, that is one of the difficulties as well, and particularly in healthcare because the systems are different, right?
Yeah. So that then also
Yeah.
does that then also block female health solutions?
I would say, it just really depends. That's the greatest answer in VC, it depends, but it depends on if it's one that needs approval or not, how the reimbursement works, how the payment works for it.
Yeah, because that is going to indeed be different from one country to the next, and then it becomes an issue.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, if you meet a founder, maybe going back to the ideal founder profile, but not to the profile, but to the cases that you invest in. What are you looking for in pitch decks?
Mm,
Are
right.
there specific things other than that of course it needs to be seed
Right. Um,
and US?
yes. So thank you for that. So seed and US based, it has to somehow fit with our investment mandate of in those, sectors that help her manage her health, build her wealth, and live in a cleaner and safer world, right?
Mhm.
So those to start with. But the actual pitch deck, a few thoughts. One is to remember that the pitch deck is to pique my curiosity and interest to say, I want to set up a call with you,
Uh-huh.
right? So there needs to be enough in there to get me excited and not so much that I get lost or bored or feel like I have enough information. I don't need to talk to you. So it's this delicate balance. I um, am looking for the ability to communicate the problem and the solution concisely and to quickly turn and explain to me how I as a GP of a fund be able to make money off of this investment for our fund, which is what my job is. And so it- and I say those three things very deliberately. I find often that the problem in pitch decks gets too much attention. Personally, I'm
Mhm.
like, I need one page, maybe two. That's
Yeah.
all. Like, hit me top level what the problem is. I want to quickly understand what the solution is, but I also want to understand that the founder, and I think this is why I really want to see this, that the founder understands what the relationship is and what my job is. Because I definitely want to improve health outcomes for all. That's my purpose. The profit is still where I really need to focus. And so if you can help me with that, to understand quickly in your pitch deck, then I like not only does it help me wanna say yes, but it helps me learn a little bit more about you, that you understand the system that you're in.
Okay, so if I can distill a tip from
Please.
this, also is it's also for founders to really understand who the investor is, who the and how he or she thinks, what he or she needs from you as a founder to be
Yes,
successful and to sell the investment to LPs, to stakeholders, to whoever.
exactly. And I believe in Rotterdam, I spoke about this, I'll say it again. There are so many great businesses ideas out there and so many wonderful ones, right? That will and make money for the founder and can have a great impact in the world and can improve health outcomes or wealth outcomes for many. That is all true. It is also true that in that large subset of companies that I've just mentioned,
Huh?
not all of those are made for not all of those should take venture dollars,
Okay.
right? And so understanding that is also important for a founder to say, what is the best type of capital for me and for my company and how I want to build my company? And so it seems like um, venture has become such a like a coveted, sexy, capital allocation for founders that, and and it works really well for some, but not for all.
So what makes a proposal venture ready?
A proposal or a
A
venture.
business, yeah.
Well, every VC is gonna have a different answer, right? But I would say one thing that we can align on is you need to see that the business can grow, so that and to grow quickly. So it is not something of a slow build over time business that we're looking for, but we're looking for, um, let's say, triple and double, 300, 200% revenue growth in the first few years.
Yeah. And that doesn't need to lead to profit yet, suppose, not in the first few years.
Not in the first few years, but now since 2021, investors are leaning back more on fundamentals, and the idea of growth at all costs is incorrect. There needs to be a growth with a path towards, profitability.
Yeah. Yeah, ultimately the money has to come out somewhere
Yes,
because otherwise if there's no profit, there's no dividend, there's no payout, there's no
right. You're just gonna go quicker into debt.
yeah, and burn quicker.
Yeah.
So
And
so
here yeah,
yeah,
and I'll just and things that, current trends I've been seeing is, um CPG is something that VCs are less and less inclined to invest in, and apps are less and less an area of focus where they were maybe 5 years ago, still very hot, but now the idea is you really need something much larger, like a b like an actual company or a platform that might incorporate the app, but you have to think bigger, which I'm gonna say that term one more time because there are a few things when we think about limiting beliefs, um, is to recognize that, particularly women, it's how we're acculturated, I'm gonna say that, is that we're not conditioned to think big and to dream big. And, I'm gonna give an example differently. I was talking to someone about she was a founder of a sports a startup focused in the sports arena, right? And talking about, thinking about the individual athlete. But then it was really helpful to be talking I was talking to a guy and he reminded me, "Well, like, why don't we talk about teams? Why don't we talk about leagues?" Right? And it was even and I find myself hitting my head on this all the time too and reminding myself, think larger, think bigger, and not and to grow expand your idea of what is possible.
Yeah.
Is that helpful?
Yeah, it is. How can female founders change that perspective to look at it through a
Yeah, yeah,
bigger
well, I
lens?
would say so if they're going to be solving problem A, right? And I wanna give a concrete example. I hope this is helpful. I have a founder who's solving for working on an app that is looking at hormones in a specific period of time for a woman, right? I actually have a few different companies that I'm looking at that are doing this along different stages. I've also met someone who's looking to understand hormones at large across her entire life stage.
Okay.
And so for me, it's a different orientation. I like the latter more than the former.
Do you put them together? Like, do you talk to them like, hey, you're looking at this from different angles?
Some of them, yeah, it's a great question. Some of them I do. I always double opt in, by the way. I'm like, this is why I think you might want to talk to this person, and here's the reason why you might. Um, and for me, it's about understanding that everyone can get to a better Pareto optimal is an economic term that I learned long ago, and the idea is to put everyone into a better position without decreasing anyone's position. So if I feel that's possible, I will certainly make introductions and, and and think about ways that they can work together for sure.
Yeah. So I want to go back to all the way the beginning
Okay.
of the conversation. You mentioned that you were a stay-at-home mom.
Yes.
Let's say there are women listening who are currently stay-at-home mom or otherwise on the sideline of working life. Two questions. One is, I heard you say in another podcast that you really did a lot on upskilling yourself. So maybe help understand why this is important to upskill and stay relevant
Yeah.
in that period.
Yes, and I'm gonna say it in 2 different ways, and thank you, dear John, for bringing that up because I do think it's an important phase of my life, and I have worked hard to reframe it in my own head, right? Because I know that or I feel that culture,
Mhm.
um, has positioned the stay-at-home mom experience despite saying, "Oh, it's so worthy, it's so admirable, so noble, blah, blah, blah."
Mhm.
It's still viewed as a, less than intellectually, I don't know, demanding time.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying that exactly correct, but, there are some issues still with the term a stay-at-home mom, some negative issues associated with it. And so, one, I want to remind anyone who's in that position, you're and because I know for me it was true,
Mhm.
I ended up getting an education in areas that I wouldn't have gotten had I stayed as a corporate person, right? As a consultant or corporate person. There are other skill sets that are natural and inherent in that role that are very specific to that role that you don't get elsewhere just by being a mom. Like, I have to learn how to nurture one. It's not and I don't know if you've heard this before, I was voted least likely to become a mother by my high
Yeah.
school class. So, yeah, I mean, it's for me, it's such a joke, but I like to throw it out there is to show the contrast. Like, this wasn't the natural state for me.
Mhm.
I had to learn a lot. And, I mean, frankly, I had to learn how to cook. I just, like, do a lot of the kind of things that were expected of that role, and at the same time, I'm like, "Okay, this is my role, I'm gonna figure it out." So that's one, is understanding that there are things that you do there that you don't get they are learning. And then the relevant piece is, thinking about, well, if you do wanna intersect back into a professional role, corporate role, there that world is learning, changing, um, evolving rapidly. And so when you left, it was at one stage. If you wanna go back in, it's incumbent upon you to keep track of those learnings. And, and the technologies, right? Like, technology is now with AI, like, you can do that now as a stay-at-home mom. You can spend some time learning it, and there's enough now that have so much, virtual learning.
Mhm.
I would suggest to anyone to, go find some courses to take online. I did that. And, to understand in your stay-at-home caregiver role or, pause or whatever, I sought roles that were fun, that were interesting, that were fulfilling, and where I was doing things that I knew I could tangibly say, "Oh, yeah, that actually is good for me in my expanded." I don't know if you wanna think about your professional toolkit, but
Mm.
I think I mentioned I taught art on a volunteer basis for kindergarten to 8th grade. One of the reasons is because I love art history. It was great, I got to learn about it, but also, I got into classrooms where I had to public speak. Like, no
Mm.
one likes to public speak, really. I certainly didn't, and I still don't love it, but I know it's part of what I do, and so I, for 8 years, a few times a year, would be in classrooms, and if you wanna think about terrifying, it's being in an 8th grade classroom with students, right, on a topic that they don't really care about, and you're the volunteer teacher. You better make that presentation engaging and interesting. So you start learning little tricks. I mean, I think back to that. That was just such a great experience for me. And I also would once or twice a school year teach to the adults who were going to go out into the other classrooms. So it just gave me some great experiences. I also, um, in another role, wrote a newsletter for 3 years. Every week, I would write a condensed newsletter for all the parents in the high school. So, I never used to like to write, by the way, so now I
Yeah.
had to do it
Yeah.
every single week, write something, and it was man, that yeah, go ahead.
Did you actually pick those responsibilities yourself? Like, hey, this is an area where I want/need to grow, so I'm going to pick those, even though I, well, quote unquote,
Yeah.
dislike it.
That's a great question because I can, history, hindsight is 2020. I can say, "Absolutely, I did, dear Gyan." And I'm not sure that it was so targeted. I'm not gonna tout my horn that I was so smart, but I definitely was seeking roles that seemed that there was a challenge in them.
Hmm.
So yeah, but I look back and I'm like, "Okay, every week I had to write a newsletter." And it was to a 400 parents who were highly educated, highly involved. Like, it was a peer group where I thought, "Okay, I don't wanna goof up here."
No.
No.
Uh, and I think it's really powerful that you actually did look for, let's say, bit more challenging
Yeah.
things. And I think it's also great advice to women who are currently, well, struggling to maybe find a purpose
Yeah.
in
And
their
I
life in the intermediate while also raising children, because it is a busy job, and I think it should be uh, paid in some shape or form beyond, let's say, the usual allowance for children and for groceries, etc.
Yeah. Here, and dear Ken, I wanna add this in, and I was, the the party mom, the classroom mom, I was the lice patrol mom, 'cause
Yeah,
in Holland at that time, like, once a month, I'd go and I'd with a few other moms, and we'd go through the hair of kids. All those experiences teach you something, and you build a bond, a community with your other parents. I would say find the if you're a stay-at-home mom, which is kind of like a founder, by the way,
yeah,
you're lonely a lot, you got, angry employee, your children,
uh,
and you got some difficult troops around you, highs and lows all day long, so it's not too dissimilar from being a founder, so find those other roles and hats to wear that bring you, um, the joy and happiness and are doing things that you feel are expanding your one lived experience, right? Because at the end of the day, and there's this poem, I can't remember the name, Mary, I think, but like we're all living this one wild, crazy life. Like, how do you want to do it? And I want to, I want it all.
yeah,
I want to try lots of different things.
cool. So I want to shift gears,
Sure.
fast forward to 2032,
Okay.
when women get more than a fair share of the capital.
Yes.
What do you hope the venture capital ecosystem looks like then? Or what, let me rephrase that. How has the venture capital ecosystem changed?
I would say how the so isn't that great? 2032, I was trying to understand how you chose that date, but I'm wondering, did you choose it also because
I started my podcast in 2022, and then one of the first guests said by 2032, so in 10 years, there has to be a non-issue. And
Okay,
by extension, your podcast will be irrelevant.
exactly.
So that's the start of
Yes.
the
No, I
journey.
okay, and I'm also thinking because there are many reports that say by 2030, 2/3 of all wealth will be held by women globally, so
Mm,
that's a big deal, right?
yeah.
And venture capital is gonna look like what society, I hope, looks like, right? That we, look at every individual as an individual, and that everyone brings his and her full self forward, and it's just not talked about anymore, right? That you have men, women investing equally across all spaces. That here's in 2032, where are we right now? We're in 25, so in 7 years, what I really hope by in 7 years that we're gonna have some really big exits in the investments that Emmeline and firms like Emmeline are making right now.
Yeah, how are exits playing into, let's say, the positive image for investing in women?
Oh, yeah, really well. No, lots of like, the data are coming in that this investing in this space really does pay off in the
Yeah,
dollars and cents.
yeah, because I think in the end it is about the dollars in
Yeah,
venture
and let's just say
capital.
in the euros as
Yeah,
well.
and the euros, but yeah. So, final question from my side.
Okay.
I'm building a tool that connects female founders and investors using AI. Um, from your perspective, what is the most important ingredient to make that tool empower female founders and investors?
So you're building, if you will, like a matching agent.
Yeah. Yeah, I call it a funding coach, but because it also coaches the female founder on their pitch decks and their let's say their the pitches that they do. So
Yeah,
basically, they can upload their pitch deck or their pitch, and then they get feedback. But in the end, I also want to make it connect
yeah.
to specific investors.
Well, here, and I'm not sure, I'm gonna say this is what's popped to the top of my head. This is a relationship business.
Mhm.
It is long term. And so I would say what's most important for your tool is to ensure that all the individuals on the platform, both founders and investors, don't conform to a certain notion, but are allowed to actually show their individuality because you do want the matches have to be true, and to have a true match, you need to present your true self, right? Because in another thing that's, for the founders in the who are listening, it is most important, like, all the advice you're gonna hear from me, from Dirk Jan, from others, it is true. What is also true is you know best who you are and what you want and what is best for your startup. And so keep that in mind as you present yourself because that energy is going to attract the right money. And if you're not attracting certain other investors, you should be thankful because they're not the right ones for you if you are presenting your truest energy, right? And I think it's hard, from both sides to recognize that, to just at some point just walk away and say, like, "This isn't right. As
Yeah,
much as I think it should be, it isn't, and my better match is somewhere elsewhere."
yeah. So dare to say no and walk away.
Yeah, yeah. I'll tell you, one of my advisors recently said and I've read this in other ways too, right? Getting to a no quickly is really very helpful for everyone.
Yeah, because at least you know not to spend time with that person.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So that's also great advice on how to handle rejections, I think.
yeah.
So Azin, thanks very much. Really
You're
appreciate this conversation. If people want to learn more about you, about Emmeline, and of course the movie and the book, Show Her the Money, where do you want to send them?
I think the best and easiest place would be LinkedIn. So, yeah, thank you, and I'm the only Azin Radsan van Alebeek. To my knowledge, I'm the only one who holds all 4 of those names, combination of my Persian background and my Dutch, assumed background, so
Yeah.
thank you. And dear Count, it's really been great a pleasure. Thank you for your questions and for your thoughtfulness and for, truly getting me to think about a few things that I hadn't thought about before, so thank you.
Okay. Well, that's cool to hear. So Azin Radsan van Alebeek, thanks very much for the conversation. Listeners, thank you very much for listening. And until the next episode, as always, keep being awesome. Well, that's a wrap for episode 123 of Women Disrupting Tech with Azin Radsan van Alebeek, titled How Showing Her the Money Changes Venture Capital. Azin and I hope that you found our conversation as engaging and inspiring as we intended it to be. And if you have any questions for Azin, please share them in the comments on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. I'll make sure you'll receive an answer. When you want to connect with Azin or learn more about Emmeline Ventures or find out where you can watch the movie Show Her the Money, please check out the links in the show notes. And as usual, you can find the show notes at womendisruptingtech.blog via the link in the caption. If you've enjoyed listening to this episode, please consider leaving a rating or a review on Spotify or Apple. Leaving a rating or a review helps new listeners find the podcast and supports my guests by giving them a bigger platform. And if you're a regular listener, please make sure to follow Women Disrupting Tech on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, or YouTube. Following is a simple, zero cost way to support Azin and my other guests in closing the funding gap by the end of 2032. For more about Women Disrupting Tech, I invite you to follow the podcast on social media. You can find us everywhere as at Women Disrupting Tech. You can also find us on Substack. On Substack, you'll find in-depth stories and behind-the-scenes insights from each episode, plus the trends that I've spotted across 123 conversations. So don't forget to subscribe to Women Disrupting Tech on Substack. Finally, if you'd like to connect with me directly, please reach out via email dirkjan@womendisruptingtech.blog or connect with me on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, simply search for my name and you'll find me. With that, I wish you a wonderful day. I hope to see you in the next episode. And until then, as always, keep being awesome.